Tonight, we're talking about wounds. And I figured this was a good talk for me to give because I'm the world's worst patient. I've never enjoyed going to the doctor and tend to avoid asking for help, and I just suck at the pain whenever possible. 2 summers ago, I fractured my wrist. I was playing Frisbee, and I really wish I could tell you that I was doing something glorious like scoring the game-winning point. But I simply tripped over my own feet and landed on my hand at a bad angle. Of course, I didn't know right then that it was broken. So I sat out for a bit and then came back to finish out the Frisbee game and then played soccer until my hand hurt so much from all that movement that I just couldn't play anymore. And of course, I still didn't go to the doctor. I decided, I'll just toss Frisbee for a bit. And then finally, my friend convinced me to go to urgent care to get it looked at. And this was all a couple hours after this happened. So although the doctors didn't catch it right away, it turned out I had fractured my wrist. And for the next 3 weeks, I essentially only had one functional hand. Now, all this is an example of what not to do. Turns out that the scaphoid is really hard bone to heal because it has poor circulation. And I also could have further injured myself and prolonged my recovery by a couple months if I'd fallen on my hand again. I figured because there wasn't really any external sign of injury that I could just fight through the pain. I was too stubborn to recognize that I needed healing and too proud to allow someone else to help me until finally my friend brought me to my senses. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, sin is a wound in our relationship with God. And like my wrist, those wounds hurt, but they're sometimes hard to see and even harder to accept. At its simplest, sin sets itself against God's love for us and turns our hearts away from it. Just like if we break the trust of someone we love dearly, like our parents, for example, by lying to them, we hurt not only them, but ourselves, because we weaken the bond of love between them and us. Now, just like there are different kinds of injuries and different levels of seriousness of injury, there are also different kinds and levels of sin. The 2 main kinds of sin which the church defines are mortal and venial sin. Mortal sin destroys the charity, this is from the Catechism. Mortal sin destroys the charity in the heart of man by a grave violation of God's law. It turns man away from God, who is his ultimate end and his beatitude, by preferring an inferior good to him. And there are 3 conditions for mortal sin. The object of the sin must be a grave matter, and it must be committed with full knowledge and deliberate consent. Examples of mortal sin would be idolatry, murder, fornication, drunkenness, purposefully skipping Mass on Sunday, and so on. To heal from these kinds of sins, we are required.
What is fornication?
That's like sex outside marriage. Yeah. So to heal from these big kinds of sin, we are required to receive Jesus' forgiveness and healing in the sacrament of confession, especially before receiving Jesus in the form of the Eucharist. Now, this is something I really struggled to understand for a long time in my life. How could it be that receiving something so holy could be wrong? Well, the reason is that just like I wasn't going to magically realize that my wrist was broken and heal it overnight by prescribing myself ibuprofen, we also sometimes need a divine physician because this kind of sin involves deliberately choosing to break our love for God beyond our own ability to repair. And on the other hand, venial sin is that injury that still needs to be healed but can be taken care of with over-the-counter medication. It hurts our relationship with God, that charity in our heart, but it doesn't break it. Examples of venial sin could be getting mad at your brother, or accidentally dropping a curse word, being too lazy to do your homework one night, or just being too stubborn to go see the doctor when your wrist really, really hurts. Now, it's important to realize that this distinction between mortal and venial sin is not a gotcha policy from God. God isn't making rules just to see us trip up and get hurt on them. In fact, the rules are there to make sure that we do what is needed to allow God to heal us in the right way when we need it most. In the Gospel of Mark, the Pharisees are asking Jesus' disciples why he is hanging out with all those riffraff, sinners, and tax collectors. Why would the Son of God, holiness incarnate, want to speak, let alone sit down and eat a meal with so many mean, greedy, unholy, and broken people? And what does Jesus say? Those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Mark 2:17. Jesus is our divine physician and wants us to come to him with our pain and our injuries to heal us. All right, so now what do we do if we don't have any wounds at the moment? Well, we still have to avoid circumstances where we are likely to injure ourselves or others. And that, of course, requires foresight and self-discipline. If you know that you're just going to crash out, thank you for teaching me new words, in an unreasonable or uncharitable way by staying in conversation, then just make yourself leave before you get to that point. If you know you won't be motivated enough to get any homework done over the weekend, spend an extra half hour each night the week before getting it all done. And remember, literally everyone who's walked this earth has sinned except Mary and Jesus. So when you mess up in life, don't let yourself be alone with your pain and your wounds. There's a way to fix it. The church is a hospital, and Jesus, the doctor, is in all the time. I'll leave you with this verse from Isaiah. But he was pierced for our sins, crushed for our iniquity. He bore the punishment that makes us whole. By his wounds we were healed.
Good job.